Bacteria are the oldest and most diverse of life forms, and we're just getting to know them. A soil sample may contain up to 1 billion bacteria that we can grow, and as many more that we can't. In fact, most organisms living in soil haven't even been identified. Some bacteria make their homes in the Earth's harshest environments, acid pools, caves without light, even ocean vents where temperatures may hit 450 degrees. Scientists think we may find them on other planets. A meteorite traveling to the Earth from Mars carried with it fossilized shapes that some experts believe look like Earth-bound bacteria. Extraterrestrial rock hunts will look for more proof. For now, we're probing what all this diversity can do for us right here. And some tiny bacteria clearly possess industrial strength. In Yellowstone's hot springs, bacteria able to take the heat also have a knack for breaking down wood fibers. In the process, the wood fibers turn white. Imagine using bacteria instead of chemicals to turn paper white. Such imagining turned into an $11.5 billion industry. Paper companies are replacing chlorine with bacterial enzymes. A much more environmentally friendly bleach. Bacteria have been put to work in gold mines too. At the Homestake Mining Company in Utah, bacteria live in the cyanide baths that help extract the gold. Until Pseudomonas bacteria came to town, the cyanide residue flowed into Whitewood Creek and killed everything living in it. Today, all the water in the mine flows through these tanks, each housing 20,000 pounds of bacteria attached to plastic discs. As the discs rotate in and out of the cyanide baths, the bacteria get the oxygen they need from the air and the food they need in the water. That's right, they thrive in what's poison to us, and they're willing to work 24 hours a day. Within 6 months, the bacterial workforce turned Whitewood Creek back into a fish-friendly stream. 4 million gallons of clean water flow into the creek each day. Just think of the tiny talents we have yet to discover.
During Rome's sweltering summer months, spectators at the Colosseum found relief from the scorching Mediterranean sun by sitting underneath a retractable canvas awning called a velarium. Scholars disagree about exactly how the awning was raised and lowered, but archaeological evidence suggests that ropes extended from winches on the ground all the way up to wooden masts that were spaced at regular intervals around the Colosseum's upper rim, 240 masts in all. Each rope looped through a pulley and then ran suspended over the seats of the Colosseum to join with an elliptical rope centered directly above the arena itself. This giant spider web of rope formed an elaborate rigging designed to support the canvas awning. Unfurling the awning would have been extremely complicated, which is why sailors from Rome's imperial fleet appear to have manned the operation. By cranking the winches in unison, they would have raised the ropes high above the seats while simultaneously stretching the sails over the rigging. The awning not only provided a welcome bit of shade for the Colosseum spectators, but it formed a dramatic opening through which the sun shone on the action of the arena below.
The Paris Exposition of 1900 in Paris, France, attracted some 40 million visitors to the city and featured almost 80,000 exhibits. Some of the structures built for the exposition became important landmarks in the city, such as the ornate Alexander III Bridge over the Seine River. Many of the exposition's exhibits were centered around the Eiffel Tower, which had been built for an earlier Paris exposition in 1889. At 300 meters, or 984 feet high, the Eiffel Tower provided visitors with a bird's-eye view of the entire exposition.
An endoscope features a flexible tip with specialized surgical attachments.
There it goes, cutting through very nicely. So we've got to cut quite a long way because it's quite a large stone to get out. Now 3-6.
3-6, roger.
Group 058, expect about time 39.
058, expect about time 39.
312, expect about time 42.
312.
Using a stone hammer to strike large flakes off a flint nodule, a skilled toolmaker, or flint napper, fashions a keel-shaped core. By hitting an antler punch placed at the tip of the pointed ridge, a fine blade is produced. And further ridges are created from which more blades can be struck. Each blade can then be carefully reworked to shape and hone it to make a razor-sharp specialized tool that can cut, among other things, antler and hide.
The construction of Egypt's Aswan High Dam in the 1960s raised the level of the Nile River south of the dam, creating the massive reservoir known as Lake Nasser. The rising water threatened to submerge the two temples at Abu Simbel, built in the 13th century BC by Egyptian pharaoh Ramses II. In 1964, an international team headed by the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization conducted an operation to save the temples. The temples were cut into movable blocks, some weighing as much as 30 tons, which were lifted and reassembled on a new site above the river. The project took more than 4 years to complete. The German airship Hindenburg provided the first commercial air service across the Atlantic Ocean and was the largest object ever to fly. In 1937, only a year after its launch, the Hindenburg ignited and crashed while landing in New Jersey.
Letters of thanks, letters from banks, letters of joy from the girl and the boy, receipted bills and invitations to inspect new stock or visit relations and applications for situations and timid lovers, declarations and gossip from all the nations.
This 1922 movie of American inventor Thomas Edison records a day of work at his West Orange laboratory in New Jersey. He and several colleagues visit a factory producing the light bulb he invented 23 years earlier. At age 74, Edison still conducts and directs experiments in his lab, searching for new and useful materials. He ends his day by punching out a time card, just like a regular employee.
Gold. It's a mineral, an element, and the most precious of the precious metals. It forms within the Earth's crust and at the Earth's surface. And sometimes it returns to the Earth in the form of priceless treasures that people once buried. For centuries, the word gold has meant beauty and value. Its color and brightness make it a universal symbol of wealth. Pure gold never loses its shine. It's also virtually indestructible and highly malleable. Usually, it's combined with other metals to increase its strength in things like jewelry and coins. There are a lot of ways people try to find hidden gold. Some use metal detectors. Others search for sunken treasure at the bottom of the sea. But most gold seekers hope to mine it from the earth in its native form. Many miners will go to extremes and endure harsh conditions in pursuit of a dream. On the Rio Madeira in Brazil, the river runs heavy with gold. Here, the men have devised their own, rather unique methods for extracting whatever gold they can find. Deposits of gold that reach the surface of the earth are typically mined as very fine particles in the beds of lakes and rivers. To reach the riverbed of the Rio Madeira, these gold seekers use a crude drill shaft. It dredges up tons of silt and stone in an exhausting, around-the-clock job. Ridged carpets act as filters to catch any gold. While sand and gravel float away, heavier gold particles sink to the bottom of the carpets. In order to get the gold out, the men run these carpets through water in a separate container. The result of their labor is a fine layer of gold dust, which doesn't look like much. In a process called smelting, the dust is fused and melted to produce a metal patty. At the end of a long day's work, they may wind up with a patty worth $1,000. Back in town, the gold patties are combined and melted into a 15-ounce bar of gold that's sold for about $6,000. It's a tough way to earn a living. But for these miners, the price of gold is worth it.
Over the last century, we've gone from the horse and buggy to a world teeming with hundreds of millions of automobiles. From the Model T to the latest race cars, one thing remains the same: the internal combustion engine. In these engines, a fine mist of gasoline is sprayed into the piston chamber. When a spark is added, the mixture of air and fuel explodes, driving the piston down and spinning the crankshaft. As the piston moves back up, it pushes the remnants of the explosion out of the piston, and the cycle repeats. Take the unburned fuel and carbon monoxide in that exhaust, multiply it by the number of cars on the roads, and you can see why the automobile is considered such a serious threat to the environment. What if we could power our cars with a different sort of reaction? One that runs cheaper and cleaner than any engine yet. Scientists are getting closer to just such a solution. This bus can run at highway speeds over 100 miles at a time. But unlike diesel-powered buses, it runs with no noise and produces only water as its exhaust. It's powered by something called a fuel cell. A fuel cell produces electricity, but it isn't a battery. Instead, hydrogen and air are run on either side of a membrane. The membrane induces the hydrogen and oxygen atoms to combine in a way that produces water and energy. The cell has no moving parts, runs slightly warm to the touch, and as long as hydrogen and air are provided, can't run down like a battery. The idea has been around for a long time, but until recently was too inefficient to be practical. Then one day an engineer at Ballard Systems looked at a new kind of membrane that had been sitting on his workbench for months. When he tested it, he found that the cells produced 4 times as much power. So far, fuel cell technology is still in the testing stage. And with so much invested in the old gasoline-burning technology, it may be a while yet before we drive fuel cell cars. But with the constant threats of rising oil prices and pollution, there's never been a better time for a replacement.